In this video, we're going to get started with the hands-on work with Native Son. What this means by getting started is getting started with the actual scheduling. By now, if you're watching this video, it's made based on the assumption that you've already read all about Native Son. You actually have started working on it. It's a lot of the hard work in your head, just understanding what you've been commissioned to do. You've done all that. Let's actually get started on drafting a rough cut filming schedule. And the key, as you can see right here, is a tool, one of the oldest and most useful tools in operations management, the idea of a Gantt chart. Now, just to recap, right? So there's this thing called Native Son, and you've got to create a rough cut filming schedule. And what does it actually boil down to? You have to figure out when do you want to work on each of 73 different tasks. And there's all these other things to remember about the tasks, who's needed for them, where they are, and stuff like that. But this was the network diagram. There's actually another bit of work to do here still inside your head. Like it says up here, divide and conquer. You're thinking, I don't even know where to begin. Begin by picking a strategy. What do you mean by that? I mean, no. People often think they have to begin by deciding certain things right away and fixing them. This type of authentic problem, the best thing you can do at the beginning is, now that you kind of understand what it's about, decide what you want to do. For instance, and these are like typical strategies, you know that different tasks are in different areas geographically. One strategy is divide and conquer. You know what? It all looks kind of complicated in London. I'm just going to get all that stuff done in London first. That's a strategy. You haven't decided a single certain thing, but you've already carved out part of the project and you're ready to get to work on it. Another one might be, I'm just going to look at what the director does versus the assistant director. It's different ways of carving up the project. Now, little word here. You may be looking at this and thinking about some other things like the opportunity to win prize points. And you go, well, my strategy is I'm going to figure out how to create the absolute shortest schedule. I deeply respect that. Don't have that be your initial strategy. And I'm only talking about those of you who are thinking like really competitively, right? Get a feasible schedule first, and then from the learning on that, start drafting a competitive schedule. It's just really difficult to create a competitive schedule from scratch when it's the first time that you've done it. Another strategy here, actually some directors have done this before, and that's that, the little circles are filming tasks, and they're actually in the case study in table 1. They're described according to the order of the plot. Some directors insist upon filming scenes in the order of the plot. That could be your strategy too. If you're feeling particularly artistic, then your strategy would be, I want to work my way down table 1, which means that I want to do this filming task right here, number 1, right away, except I remember, wait a minute, precedence relationships. That means that I'd have to do, squares were technical tasks, this task first. It has to be finished first. Number 68. Oh, right. This is location 5 in here. That's prepping location 5, and that's filming the only scene that's on location 5. Anyway, if you were somebody like Robert Altman, was a favorite director that liked to do this, that would be your strategy. That's how you'd begin. Now, it's going to be tough to keep track of all of this information, but the first video, if you watched it, actually did hint at this, the idea of dashboarding. It is not uncommon to come across problems with a lot of moving parts. Okay, one of the best things you can do in trying to analyze those problems and come up with solutions is, first off, set up everything that you need. There's the case study right there, right? Okay, this is obviously really important. I was just pointing at it before. This is the network diagram. You're setting yourself up a workspace. Oh, right, table 1, that's got all that information about who's needed for what, and the order of it is the order of the plot. Table 2, that's where all the technical tasks are. Oh yeah, and there was that business about I just have to be careful if I'm moving people between locations. Remember how it said that you need time for travel? Now you see what we've done? We've created now literally a workspace for us. I highly recommend this, where you're not going to be using each one of these things constantly, but they are out in front of you like the dashboard of a car to glance down and look at it when you need it. Now, center of this, the true steering wheel, so to speak, is the Gantt chart. A Gantt chart is simply an illustration of timing. There's many paths up this mountain, but this is really the easiest way to create a rough cut filming schedule for Native Son, is draft yourself out a Gantt chart. Now, Gantt charts take many, many different forms. This is a clip, obviously from Excel, of a Gantt chart that's been painted in Excel. Maybe we should back up a little bit, because Gantt charts aren't specific to Native Son, and they're not specific to movie planning, and they're not specific even to project management. Gantt charts for centuries have been done on paper, and that's a good place to begin. That might be how you decide that you want to develop your Gantt charts for Native Son, is on paper. Under the accessories that are available for Native Son, there is this file blank Gantt chart for Native Son in all capital letters. And if you print it out, it looks like this. It's just a blank grid. If you would like to develop your Gantt chart on paper, you're perfectly welcome to use, this is essentially a blank piece of paperwork. You're actually going to need several pages of this. But whether you do this on paper or not, whether you use any of the accessories that have been made available to you, or whether you use a tool that's entirely of your own creation, there's a couple things here in this, the most basic Gantt chart, we ought to pause and talk about. A Gantt chart is nothing more than an illustration of timing. There are two key issues here that you do need to keep track of. And right, you already know this, like from going over the story. There's the idea of, and they're grouped in this free Gantt chart all up at the top, there's the idea of keeping track of the people. You know, making sure that they're not meant to be two different places at once, making sure they have enough time to travel between locations. In this format, the people are all together at the top, and then the places are all together at the bottom of the grid. Oh, right, because you also do need to keep track of what you're doing at various places, because, sort of similar to people, two different things can't go on at the same place at the same time. We have sort of similar issues of shared resources, right, and avoiding conflicts, and this will become a means of doing that. This is the timeline. All Gantt charts have a timeline. Oh, right, you downloaded, there's no numbers up here. One of the first things that you would do is that you would create the number line starting on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Oh, let's say that I'm Robert Altman, right? I said that was one of the famous directors that likes to do everything in the order of the plot. We had noted that that means you're going to have to prep location 5 right away. That is task 68. That doesn't take any people, right? But it does take location 5. I just made a decision. Now, don't get excited. This shows, right, this particular task taking 3 days, in that I've marked 3 days, the first 3 days. Now, wait, your data, the data for Native Son changes all the time. No length of task that you see here is necessarily the length of that task in your assignment, okay? So this is for demonstration only. Nonetheless, I'd have to do task 68 right away, and this is how I would decide. I would mark it. Now I know, at least for the first 3 days, in this particular data set, what's going on location 5. Now, why was I doing that? Because I was Robert Altman, and I wanted to get started right away in filming task 1, and this is saying, like, well, let's pretend that it's 3 days long. I would mark then the next 3 days. I do need to remember that task 1 also requires the assistant director. Look this up on table 1, because I'm pretty sure it'll be true for you, although it won't necessarily be 3 days. I am, see that, also marking that up there, because that's what's going to keep me from now giving the assistant director anything else to do, as I've made 2 decisions here. I've made 2 decisions. Really what this assignment is you just have to make 73 decisions. There are 73 tasks. I've already made 2 right on behalf of my own schedule. So if you were going to do this manually, you'd need a bunch of these blank sheets, right? Because it's only 30 like some odd days. It's going to take longer than that. You create one long number line across the top. You start making some decisions, and when you make a decision, you mark, right, the location that's being used and the people that are being used, if in fact any people are actually needed, and you be sure to label it. That's what that, writing is. This is what that task is. Oh, and this, I recommend this. Like when I'm developing solutions, I always have, that's what that copy of the network was for in the dashboard. It wasn't just to check if there were any precedence relationships, which is what the network is communicating. It's also so that it can be a checklist. Like, how do I know when I'm done? Right, well, I did that one, I did that one. And then you just keep adding. You keep adding until, like, when do you know that you're done? Keep marking them off. And when all 73 are scheduled, you have developed your vision for how this movie should be filmed. You can see in this particular graphic, a lot of the stuff's already been done, but there's still some things like right in here that need to be scheduled. Okay, so that's all on paper. Paper is perfectly fine. If you are at all comfortable with Microsoft Excel, though, I think that you might enjoy working in a spreadsheet environment. Okay, there's just sort of additional conveniences with that, and that's why there's a variety of spreadsheet tools that are available, one of which actually I was using for that other illustration. This is, under Spreadsheet Tools, the simplest spreadsheet. Imaginatively titled Simple Spreadsheet. Simple Spreadsheet, example of Gantt chart form. When you download it, there won't be any coloring or letters here. There'll just be this blank grid, because that's all that it is. It's similar to the piece of paperwork that we were looking at. It's just that it's been described in Excel by using borders, between the cells to create a grid. But you can use formatting, right, fill, for a wide variety of festive colors to mark the length of tasks. And you can type in, neater than my handwriting anyway, the name of the actual tasks that it is that you're scheduling. This is a way to develop your Gantt chart that's almost perfectly parallel to what we were just talking about, except you're just not using pens and paper. You're using essentially the formatting features in Excel. One note about this is that this really is the same as the paperwork, except the way that it's set up. This one that I provided is the timeline, the days, runs up and down. It doesn't run left to right. Most Gantt charts traditionally, the idea of the timeline is always horizontal, and then here's the things that we're tracking, and then they become the rows, but there's no rules. And in this particular environment, this is another way to do it that in this particular grid proves to be more convenient. It's kind of more like, for instance, if you're looking at your daily planner in Outlook, and it's blocking out when your classes are and appointments and stuff. That is essentially a Gantt chart that runs up and down. Okay, now that's not the only spreadsheet that is available to you. For years and years and years, I would generate solutions using this particular tool, and then I just decided to post it, and it is imaginatively named the More Complicated Spreadsheet. More complicated in that it does a little bit of work for you. It does conflict checking if you care to get to know it. There are some instructions across the top here. Actually, part of it's cut off right here. But here's how you use this spreadsheet. Oh, you remember, like, I'm Robert Altman. I want to prep that location 5 right away, task 68, and film the first scene in the plot, the opening of the story. That's task 1. You enter the days that you want to be working on particular tasks here. And it doesn't even matter which column you enter them in. So I entered 68, 68, 68, and then I entered a couple ones, meaning filming. Enter it here, and you'll notice what happens is it marks it for you. That's what it's doing. It marks it for you under the locations, and it marks it for you. There's the assistant director right there. And one feature of that is, now notice I've added something here. I added task 5 right here. One feature of it is, oh, wait a minute, that probably wasn't a very good idea, because I added task 5 when task 1 with this data, right, is still going on, and both of them require the assistant director. Do you see how something has flagged here? It's changed color, conditional formatting. Oh, warning me that, you know what, that addition of task 5 right there, that's not a good idea. He can't be doing 2 things at once. Okay. Now there is one other spreadsheet. It's the newest one. It's the most complicated one. It provides the most services. It's the one that I use nowadays, actually, to develop solutions. It has some caveats. This particular spreadsheet, Native Sun Gantt Tool.xlsm, has macros. See the security warning here? Security warning, some active content's been disabled. Enable content. Okay, this one, the most complicated one, if you're interested in it, okay, word of warning, it uses macros. So first off, it's not gonna run unless you enable those macros. It's not gonna run if the security settings on your computer do not allow macros, because macros, the program is going to run for itself and do, basically it paints the Gantt chart, but do what it wants. And obviously there's room for mischief there, like it supposedly doing something to your hard drive. No, the code that I wrote, right, has no malicious intent in it. Now, it gets worse if you have an Apple operating system. Apple operating system simply ignores, this is written in VBA, absolutely ignores any VBA routines, and this won't work. This is of no interest to you. Let's say you have Windows computer and you say, okay, enable content. What does this bring me that any of the other ones don't? Well, the way that it works is you're trying to decide when to do things. You enter the day that you want to start them here, and then you click on that button right there. And it basically paints, here we go, had to back out a little bit, entered some arbitrary numbers over here. It paints the Gantt chart for you. So one of the things that it's doing in additional, if you care to play with it, is that it's reading, and you'll see this if you actually look at the booklet, it's reading the tables from your assignment. So it's painting the exact length of the various tasks, whereas everything else that we've looked at, you know, you need to look up that task is 5 days long, and you need to make sure that you mark exactly 5 days across your Gantt chart. This is actually doing it for you. It's doing it for you, and I here, you know, just entered a few things. It will run a partial solution. It will also flag any problems that it finds with your partial solution. That's what these darker cells are, because actually if you look really closely, what they say is bad, B-A-D, and then dash a number, bad 18, bad 43. That's because on a different tab in the same spreadsheet booklet, it says error sheet. And that's where you look up, oh, bad 1, assistant director is scheduled into more than one filming day on more and more activity on day 4. It's warning you, you know, like that's not going to work. You better go back and correct that. This, like I said, I find very, very handy for developing solutions myself. Just a few cautionary notes or caveats. It can only check for problems in what you've already put there. And you say, well, yeah, I get that. Let me see if I can get this to back up. I had run, for instance, just these. I could add in more numbers, click again, and it would repaint it. It can't warn you about everything. If you're like leaving something out that's needed, and you leave it blank until the very, very end, it's not going to warn you if like necessarily you didn't leave enough room for it. Okay, it doesn't come with any warranty, guaranteed or implied. But if you're at all comfortable with Excel, and if you're comfortable with letting the macros run, you might find that this one is actually the most convenient way to explore a solution for Native Sun. Now, you'll create a beautiful Gantt chart. So here's something that the macros painted, which has fewer mistakes in it. We're never going to see it. That's the ironic thing. Whether it's on paper or whether it's a spreadsheet, you will create this beautiful vision of the timing of 73 tasks, and we are never going to see that. No, what we're going to see is what you enter into the website, mgd2.buffalo.edu/EA. Right, you log into that site, you select Native Son, and you enter your solution here. That point, that's what we see. Okay, so what we talked about in this video is how to actually develop your solution. There are a few issues that go along with simply submitting it. If that's not completely clear to you, well, then you might want to watch the third video.